What's up, guys? Just a couple quick announcements before we begin. The MKW Community Podcast is on a shit ton of new platforms now. You can find us on YouTube, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, and Apple Podcasts. Please support us by adding us on whatever podcast app you use. Also, you can now join our Discord. You should be able to find the link in the description. Anyways, here's the show. Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the MKW Community Podcast. I am again joined by my co-host Miles. How's it going, Miles?
Yo, what's good?
And today we have our very first guest on the show. Justin, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thanks for being here. So recently you made an interesting video titled Why Mario Kart Wii is Dying. Miles, would you like to give us a brief overview of what the video is talking about?
Yeah, of course. I'll try to be as brief as I can, but obviously it's best if you go and watch Justin's video. It is about half an hour long, but he kind of touches upon everything in a very concise and a very well-informed manner, so I definitely recommend you watch the video.
And also, I just want to say, if you haven't listened to the first episode, we talk about one of the big points in that video, so that'll also give you some context on what we're talking about here.
So for the most part, Justin's video was exposing an ongoing trend among moderators of the WeMfi staff. And these kind of trends made them echo their own thoughts into Bean's server. And what this did, it caused everyone to all agree with each other, and it started making them refuse to take other points of view into consideration. Some of the mods on the WeMfi staff also started to exhibit aggression when defending their views, and they started to criticize other people like Victor for their actions, while they were still discussing, punishments for him. And this kind of behavior from the mods shows a deep emotional investment in the game and in the community. And in turn, it could be concluded that most of the decisions made by moderators in the community are made out of a clear bias. So this is an obvious point of concern among everyone in the community. So Justin, how exactly do you think this behavior exhibited from the staff in the past week more or less threatens the state or the longevity of the community?
So the staff behavior that was really concerning to me was how most of the Wii mods, especially in Bean's Discord server when I was in there, didn't really seem to like the competitive community and made rash decisions without really considering their point of view, because the casual and the competitive side had such a different viewpoint on the situation. Most of the competitive side really didn't see Victor as really needing to be banned from WeMfi and thought it should just be a lounge punishment. And most of the people from the casual side thought he should just be gone from WeMfi, judging by what they saw from the Discord server.
Something really interesting you point out in your video, too, is that Bean didn't even watch the video. Bean just took information from what other people were saying and also from what Victor said and just used it against him without actually reviewing the case at all. Do you think the fact that Bean has this cult of people around him that all agree with him is a problem? Or do you think that we should just let them exist, separately from the competitive community?
I think it's potentially damaging to have so many people agree with you, especially when you have so much power in the community, because Bean is a WeMfi moderator and he makes CTGP and makes a lot of decisions that help and benefit the competitive community. And the competitive community doesn't really have somebody like Bean on their side that can really represent them. So if Bean makes a bunch of decisions for the competitive community and doesn't really associate with them or know any of them that well, then I feel like that could be problematic.
So Justin, your video kind of highlighted, the main points of kind of the corruption that exists in the staff. So I think it's also important to consider, what responses did you receive from staff members to your video?
Yeah, I received responses from KD and Raptor directly into my DMs, and I was also able to see what Mr. Bean thought of my video. He never actually watched it, which was a little unfortunate. He just thought it was clickbait. Luckily, I did get a response from KD, though, and he mostly cleared up all of my concerns about Mario Kart boards that I had in the original video. There was actually a response by T to Jirogio's thread, who said, they thought over the situation and, they unlocked the thread for people to talk on it again. And they mostly removed the original Jirogio thread about the Victor versus Amy case because Girodrio is known as a troll, and the thread seemed kind of memey, especially with the title, when it was like Pesky Swede versus Default Player American Girl.
So yeah, following our podcast and following T unlocking that one thread that Giorgio made, Katie kind of went on a Twitter rant, and he pretty much explained his displeasure for people that went against him. He says here, "Shut up with your stupid idea that you're not allowed to criticize anything. You're not allowed to perpetuate rumors and false information. You can criticize the real, factual information all you want."
Yeah, I think the main points you should take from his his Twitter rant isn't exactly to whom he was directing this to, but just kind of his general attitude. He's very impolite, and he seems to kind of make these mountains out of molehills. He does make a big deal out of these things, whether it's to make a big show, whether it's a gain for attention, or whether or not he thinks this is a rightful reaction. This is concerning. This isn't how someone who's an administrator of both MK boards and a moderator of WeemFi, should be behaving. This is quite erratic. And if we want someone who's going to make, sound and objectively good decisions for our community, it shouldn't be someone who's, at some points this irrational.
Right, and I don't want to go on a huge KD rant because I've had limited interactions with him one-on-one. But Justin, from your experience talking to him recently, I mean, what was kind of the sort of vibe you got from him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I actually did bring up the concerns about him Twitter ranting and going on tangents and lounge suggestions. He mainly told me he wants to distance his personal opinions and his venting from how he runs the community, to which I kind of agree, but I also think like the personality of somebody and how angry they get also kind of affects how they run the community.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So mainly when he was doing his Twitter rant as well, I think he was mostly referring to Dermo and his thread when he was talking about Katie being kind of a nonce and talking to Season, who was 12 years old and pansexual when Katie was a fairy maid or whatever. And I did bring that up in the video. I don't really think Katie's actually a pedo. What I'm more concerned about is Season being so young, because he was 12 years old. I think he lied in his application to getting onto WL Council.
Right. This issue was something that was talked about in our Discord as well, about how Season was on MK board staff, presumably before he turned 13, but it's just hard to prove that Katie knew that, so I don't think it's something that can really be used against him.
Yeah, obviously it's just one part of the whole picture in terms of KD. Obviously, a lot of parts of his administration is very problematic, and this is just one more thing to consider. I think also the way he's been treating this whole situation is even more important. We've had threads become unlocked in the past few days, but still we haven't really been seeing any kind of responses. The impression that KD kind of gives that he doesn't want to welcome any criticism or any differing opinions still very much exists.
Mm-hmm. Justin, from how KD responded to you and to how Raptor responded to you, do you think there's any closure to this, or do you think it's still a problem that needs to be addressed further?
So when KD and Raptor responded to me, I felt a little better about the situation because they mostly cleared up a few of the WeemFi mods that I talked about and then shifted the blame to other WeemFi mods that are more the issue, because really Zach Ruff, Raptor, and KD aren't the problem with the WeemFi moderators. It's more like the higher ups, basically, just not really caring about the competitive community and not even really the casual community to a certain extent. When it comes to Mario Kart boards, KD handled the criticism pretty well and said, like, they're starting to change and open up the boards a little more. And there was a post by T saying how it actually brought up some good points and they tried to clarify the situation and then say they're going to try and do better in the future.
You bring up the WeemFi staff again, so to bring it back to that, it's actually kind of fascinating. Something you talk about in your video is how Dalen still isn't banned from WeemFi, despite being proven to have exchanged nudes with 2 underage people when he was himself over the age of 18. Justin, were there any other responses to your video that you wanted to talk about? Or?
Yeah, so there was also Raptor's response to the video. When I made the video, I just thought, oh yeah, Raptor is really set in his ways. He just hates the competitive community because of all the things he was saying. He went into my DMs to talk about the situation a little bit. He clarified that the toxic core he was talking about was not the whole of the competitive community. It was just people that act like Victor, which is what he said. I assumed he meant the entirety of the competitive community because when we were all joining the server, he was saying, like, everyone's here just to justify Victor's ban. He also mentions that he actually dislikes the casual community as much as the competitive, but just for different reasons. You know, there's benefits to one, and then negatives to the other. And then his main point was that the Wii mods wouldn't have taken action if the lounge staff just gave Victor a punishment that he really deserved for the situation that they thought he deserved. Saying, like, there is private room leniency. This is their ideology that if the host doesn't want trolling in a room and somebody trolls, then that person should be Weemfi banned, was their ideology, which I don't fully agree with.
So you talk about how Mr. Bean didn't seem to get anything out of the video, but do you think that the top level of Weemfi moderation not caring about the competitive community, do you think that's really a big deal? Because I could totally see it where it's been like this for a long time and the competitive community is still doing well. So why do you think that this matters?
So what I heard from Raptor mainly is Weem runs his server like a private server because ultimately it's mainly just a private server where he can still play Mario Kart Wii with his friends rather than having it public and open to everyone else. And most of his decisions are made just because he has to and not really he actually cares for the community and making sure that it thrives and stays alive. So I feel like the ideology there might impact the community a little bit. If it was given to somebody else that really cared about keeping the community alive, then I feel like it might last a little longer.
All right, so stretching off that, Justin, we should really be discussing, changes that we want to see with the Weemfi staff, because we can butt heads and we can complain about what Weemfi staff is doing wrong, but we should also kind of, notice what we want changed in the community. And I think one of the biggest problems with Weemfi staff is that they don't kind of adhere to a strict kind of policy. And what I mean by that is that there's no terms of service or code of conduct that that players kind of have to adhere by when they're playing Weemfi, except, of course, like not hacking. Everything else is really kind of vague. And when you have like these kind of vague guidelines for what is and isn't allowed, this is where these kind of problems arise. Staff will take action. And since it's not really explicitly stated somewhere, people are going to agree or disagree whether or not, the punishment is really valid. So the problem is, of course, these kind of rules could be arbitrary. They could be like rules that, we kind of addressed that Katie posted in response to locking threads. Of course, these rules could get out of hand. So what kind of action should Weemfi staff be taking in the future, to better moderate these kind of situations and to better enforce, these kind of awkward situations that happen in the community?
So you mentioned not having a terms of service for the Weemfi moderators, and that's how they run. And there actually is a Weemfi rule set that they have in a Google Docs made by Zach Ruff. But sadly, I've been also told by KD that only a few of the Weemfi moderators actually follow it, and some mods still make decisions based purely off their own discretion, and that's just really unfortunate. So some changes I would like to see is more following like a rule set rather than making your own decisions. And also what would be nice is since Mogi Lounge and it's still relatively a new thing, I feel like the lounge staff and the Weemfi moderators really need to have a dialogue with each other on how they will handle cases, so it's not something that happens and lounge staff has to leak out into a decision made by Weemfi moderators with lounge staff being left in the dark.
Yeah, that's a great point about the lounge staff. There definitely should be, more of a. They should really complement each other a lot more. There should be a lot more productivity with, Weemfi staff and lounge staff when you have, Lounge really is kind of the beacon of the competitive Mario Kart Wii community, whether you like it or not. So, without this kind of dialogue in between them, how can anything be really productive for any of these problems?
I think another thing you guys are sort of leaving out is that it would just help to have better moderators that care more about the competitive community. The ones we have right now are okay, but there are only a certain few that really pay attention to the competitive community, so maybe just adding a few more ones that represent our side of things would be better.
Yeah. I kind of like how Lounge has it. They, in this new season 4, I think it is, they switched the or they didn't really switch the arbitration. They just added a casual arbiter. Obviously, they were intending for their casual section of Lounge to be a little more active than it is. It's a little dead at the moment. But their intention was to kind of have different staff members for like each side of the community, like different staff members for the casual side, and then having the staff members that they've had for the past few seasons to continue running the competitive part of Lounge. They should have a portion of the staff that's more focused on the competitive community, whether or not it's strictly regarded to Lounge or just to the competitive community in general. I think it'll just be a more productive move for Lounge to kind of delegate more responsibility to more staff members, as you said, Maxi, that care more about their side of the community.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, something I would also like to add is that just the split between the casual community and the competitive community is just way too big, and that probably hinders the community as a whole. I feel like the steps that Lounge is taking to try and cater to the casual community, they're steps in the right direction, but it's just, there's too much of a bias against the other side of the community, from competitives and then from casuals as well.
Mm-hmm. So in your video, you talk about a lot of different WeFi moderators in, specific detail. Is there anything you learned about any of those moderators that we should know about?
So yeah, some things I learned about some WeFi moderators is that they're not as bad as I made it seem, such as Katie, Raptor, and Zach. They're not as bad as they seem. But I also learned that some are worse than I made it out to be, such as Atlas, actually. I learned from a comment on the video by Seek that he was actually accused of pedophilia against a 14-year-old girl when he is a 20-year-old man, and there's actually a paste spin saying what he did by the 14-year-old girl.
That's fucking great. Another pedophile accusation in the community.
Yeah.
Great to hear that, obviously.
And if I recall correctly, Dalen is still a part of the WeFi moderators. I think he's still a WeFi moderator. Is this true?
Mm-hmm. Yes, he's still a WeFi moderator. Weem refuses to remove him from the WeFi moderator position for whatever reason. And both Katie and Raptor told me that they both think he should have been removed, and that they don't know why he's still on it.
That's nuts. And if that doesn't tell you how out of touch the higher ups in the WeFi moderators are, that just shows it right there.
Yeah, I think when this whole thing was happening with Stunky and Dalen and everything like that, I think the community, even though for some people it took a lot of convincing, I think we kind of all came to the consideration that what these people were doing was horrible. This was just grooming and predation of minors in the community. I think it's very telling of Bean not to, remove. I don't know if it's up to Bean or if it's up to Ween himself or someone else in the moderation staff. But I think it's very telling of the community that we still have these people with in such powerful positions in the community. What kind of statement we should be considering? What kind of statement does that bring? Does this mean that the community is accepting of these people? If we're having them in, such esteemed positions as WeFi moderators, I think this is obviously a clear problem. But, if what has happened in the past before with, Dalen and Stunky and how we treated it with MK boards, if that wasn't enough, what could we do, in order to, I don't want to say to convince the higher-ups, but just for the higher-ups to take into consideration, why do we have people who have had such controversial and such, murky paths continue to have their positions in the WeFi staff?
So, Bean actually doesn't really make the decisions on who is and isn't a WeFi moderator. Like, he can say who he doesn't think should be on it. But there are some ideologies that I've seen from Bean that really shocked me. After I uploaded the video, I was looking in his Discord server, and he said this quote. He said, "But seriously, if we ban people for pedophilia, which is not MKW related at all, then why not bullying too?" And honestly, that quote really shocked me when I first read it. And it's because pedophilia actually puts people in danger in the community because, you know, that's grooming and that's affecting a child's life. And then trolling is just, you know, making somebody unhappy in a game. You know, it's not a good thing, but it doesn't put somebody in danger in real life.
Yeah. Just to wrap up, though, something to think about, though, is that there are no laws against being a dick, but there are clearly laws against being a predator and being a pedophile. And I don't think that they should be equated. And what being said is obviously problematic for the community. And yeah. So, just to wrap up here, though, I mean, what do you guys think about the future of the Mario Kart Wii community? I mean, do you think that things like this are spelling doom for the community? And Justin, do you think that Mario Kart Wii really is in danger of dying because of this?
So when I made the video, the original title was maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but you know, it kind of it really put into words like how drastic I feel there needs to be change, and if, you know, nothing is done, then it really could just be a slow decline just because the server's not run as good as it should.
Yeah. I personally think the longevity of the community, after, you know, everything we've discussed in the past few podcasts and in Justin's recent video, I think we're in, you know, better hands than before. I still think staff has, you know, a long ways to go in terms of kind of reforming and adapting to, you know, a community that's kind of changed a lot in the past few years. Remember, it's become a lot more competitive in many ways, and in other ways has become a lot more casual and more of like a gateway effect into, you know, enlarging the community. So I think if the community at large has kind of like a restored ability to, you know, bring up problems with the staff and suggest things without kind of a fear of any backlash from staff, I think as soon as that is restored, the community will be set back on a path, you know, that's much better and much more optimistic for the future.
In terms of competitive, the community is already at risk just from a lack of interest and a lack of motivation to keep playing Clan Wars after 11 years. But I think that the fact that the moderators are biased against competitive players already, and the fact that people are seeing this, is just going to turn people off more. And this is just going to compound to that. So is there anything else you two wanted to add?
No, I guess we can wrap it up here. Thank you guys for watching our podcast. Be sure to leave some feedback. As always, we'd love to hear what we can do right, what we can do wrong in our next podcast. Be sure to check out our Discord as well. We have a bunch of information there in terms of where you can listen to us, where you can find us. So yeah, that's been Miles. Thank you guys for watching.
Before we go, Justin, is there anything you wanted to plug? Any new projects you're working on?
Not really, but if you haven't watched the video already about why I think Mario Kart Wii is dying, then I'd really suggest you go watch the video.
It's a long video. It's almost 30 minutes, but it's a very good video.
Yeah. I mean, anything that's a little vague that we brought up in our last few podcasts, I'm sure Justin has brought it up in better detail and in better context than we did. So be sure to check out that video if you haven't already.
Yeah, all right. That's all for this week, and we'll be back to you for episode 3 very shortly. And thank you so much for watching, and goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. See you.